get into the field of donkeys.
Oh man, what a donkey punch.
I mean, I think we might have found the episode title just by me making up something.
Donkey punch of the Dresden Files.
Welcome to Ludic Lounge, everybody.
Oh, hi.
Sorry for that non sequitur. I am your co-host, John Soros. With me, as always, is the man, the myth, the legend, Antonicus, Gluteus Maximus IV. Bit of magical good evening or good morn to the people, Anthony.
A magical good morn and or afternoon and or evening to you all.
I was expecting to turn into like Christopher Lee. Just like
I was going there. I was going there. I was like, I'm just gonna butcher it anyway.
How do you feel about the old Chris Lee Draculas?
You know, I haven't watched them in a while, and they're on my docket as far as a horror movie watch with my wife Amanda. So it's gonna be one of the next ones I watch. So I will let you know if it holds up.
You know, he and Peter Cushing were best friends.
No shit.
Grand Moff Tarkin and Dracula were best friends.
Ain't that something?
I know, right?
You know,
the more you know.
I can't picture Grand Moff Tarkin in anything other than Grand Moff Tarkin. I mean, I saw him in that shitty B-roll movie that was on Mystery Science Theater 3000, the remake on Netflix. Uh-huh. And I'm just like, I can't even conceive that this is Grand Moff Tarkin.
I'm pretty sure he was in one of those Dracula movies. I mean, of course, like any old British actor, he was in Doctor Who.
Of course.
Something with Daleks. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. But speaking of magical science fiction / other fantasy and fanatical things, John, both of us have read the most recent Dresden File books. And yes. I think we're going to have some talking about them tonight.
Yeah, because this is a big moment in the series. Like, and you know, for those of you who had listened to our previous download episode on the Dresden Files as a whole,
all two of you, with one of them being me,
and the other being me.
That one stuck a little bit.
Yeah, I know. That's just, it's okay, buddy. I still got you. We frequently referred to the book Changes as being a monumental moment in the series where nothing was ever the same. And I feel like between these two books, we have hit a nothing is ever going to be the same type situation. Less so with peace talks, more so with where we end up at the end of Battleground. But we'll get into both in due time. We're going to do a nice little two-parter episode. So this first episode that you're listening to right now will be all about peace talks, and next week's episode is going to be all about Battleground and what happens, what we think is coming next, and what we liked and didn't like. For full warning, for those of our listeners who did not take the opportunity to catch up on the Dresden Files, which you should because it's a fantastic book series. We're going to go into full spoilers here, folks. So if you don't want...
And the reason behind that, folks, is that John and I were talking about it, and we're like, well, should we spoil, should we not? And then we got into talking about the books themselves, and we're like, well, it's kind of hard not to go into spoilers with all the shit that happens.
Yeah, and some fuckery does occur. All kinds of fuckery.
All kinds of fuckery.
But I think we can begin with peace talks, Anthony. So if I can just give a brief little blurb. When the supernatural nations of the world meet up to negotiate an end to ongoing hostilities, Harry Dresden, Chicago's only professional wizard, joins the White Council security team to make sure the talks stay civil. But can he succeed when dark political manipulations threaten the very existence of Chicago and all he holds dear?
Ooh.
It's the spookies. And we're already, we're still into spookies, even though we're out of a spooky month. Anthony, what do you think of peace talks? Just in general at first.
So, John, I actually touched this upon off camera, obviously off mic, if you will. Mm-hmm. Peace talks to me, I have a few thoughts, a few bullet points, if you will, that I want to talk about even before we dive into the series itself or the book itself. My first thinking that I have upon it was when I was diving into this, I was like, Jesus, I really should have done more than just a wiki search on the first previous, however many books. I really wish I would have reread them all, just because there was so much plot, so much story, so many characters that I was like, I can have a remembrance of some of these characters, but the others, I was like, okay, I think I know where you're from, and some of them, like, I have no idea who you are or which book you were from.
Yeah.
And an example I have is one of the main characters in Peace Talks and Battleground, the sequel to it, is Butters. And John, for the life of me, I couldn't place Butters. I couldn't remember his story arc. I couldn't remember anything besides I think he was the ME, but I don't remember his arc. I don't remember his development. And I had a hell of a time trying to remember, and I had to reach out to you, in which you kind of filled in the gaps for me.
Yeah, and like Butters is one of the more interesting ones, but I agree with you. I feel ashamed or frustrated with myself that I didn't put in the time beforehand. But with the way these books are, they are essentially kind of done in ones. So they all are building towards some end game. I mean, what that exactly is going to be is still probably a couple books down the line. But right. I mean, for the most part, you can somewhat jump into these, get a full story, but it is ultimately more satisfying if you have the pre-existing knowledge that comes with going through the previous books.
See, John, I think I'm going to contest that point you just made, because not the point about reading all the books before this one, because normally I would agree. And like, if you read any of the first 5 of the Dresden Files books, yeah, I can kind of get where you're like, yeah, I can get a solo adventure just from this alone. But where it comes to Peace Talks, and this is my next point, they tried to give you like a synopsis of all the characters, and they tried to do all of that, but there were so many books there that honestly, even with the synopsis of the particular characters you're reintroduced to or plot lines you're reintroduced to, it really just would have done everybody more justice. And by everybody, I mean myself, I should say. I would have had way more justice just reading all of the books, and then coming into this, I feel like I would have taken a lot more away from it. Not to say I didn't get emotionally invested or emotionally involved or still was moved, as only the way this series can move me. But I think it would have taken it, from 9 to 11 for me, essentially, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Speaking from my experience, I was so, I guess, excited to just be back with these characters that a lot of the flaw of this kind of being a giant info dump before the big Act 3 stuff.
Yeah, it was a huge info dump.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just I think it's in part due to the political nature that this book finds itself mired in.
Right.
And I mean, we can talk over that briefly. I mean, the whole inciting incident for this is that Harry, as a member of the White Council and as a Grey Warden, essentially a wizard cop, is drawn into peace negotiations because the magical world is fighting with itself. And again, Anthony, that's something that I wish I had reacquainted myself with a little bit more, because I was at this point, it's like I forgot why they were fighting.
Yeah, me too.
And that was the one thing that I was a little more frustrated at myself, and I just had to refresh myself and to give everybody the information. So when the events of changes involve the destruction of a certain type of vampire, the red vampires. So in the absence of those, the red court, those vampires, it's a power vacuum, and everybody's scrambling to fill that void. This ancient race of water-dwelling creatures called the Fomor emerged to fill that void of the red court, and that's part of the reason everybody's fighting each other. So at the request of the Fomor and other people, one being familiar face to the Dresden Files, Baron John Marconi, Gentleman Johnny.
This gentleman, I did not need a whole synopsis of 10 books. This guy right off the bat.
So Johnny Marconi George Clooney, motherfucker.
Yeah, that's honestly, I actually picture him in my head, in my art style for this book, as every time people read, they create their own story in their head. At least that's what I do. And so I assume, of course, other people do it. I picture him more so like literally Lex Luthor from Superman and Justice League. Like I picture copy from there, paste into this story. That's how I picture him.
Is Clancy Brown still voicing him?
Yes, absolutely.
That would be amazing.
100%, John. And if you think about it, it makes the most sense. Especially since he's Baron McCone.
Oh, Jesus. File that. You file that right now.
No, that was good.
Fine. So, Harry getting drawn into essentially security for the peace talks goes up against everything he's doing with Mab. And I think we could talk about Harry as the Winter Knight and the frustrations we have with that, and Harry's obvious frustrations with that, because the last couple of books have dealt with him really trying to set his own ways into the mantle of the Winter Knight.
Yeah, he's essentially trying to make it his own. So, from my understanding, from what my remembrance was the mantle of the Winter Knight has always been a certain way. They're always, excuse the pun, but they're always cold in their demeanor. They're always just run by their passions, run by the dark side of the Force, if you will. And
so fucking horny, though.
Yeah, just so fucking horny. That's pretty much how it goes. But Dresden is trying.
Series goes sometimes.
But Dresden, yeah, exactly. But Dresden is trying to make it his own. He's trying to be Harry Dresden and the Winter Knight. He's not supposed to be. He's not trying to be the Winter Knight Harry Dresden. He's trying to be Harry Dresden, Winter Knight.
Yeah, it's all about making the role work for him rather than him working for the role.
Yeah, and you know what? I appreciate how that role evolves, especially towards Battleground and like the little intimate moments he has with Mab before the Titan comes into the playing field and everything. Like, holy shit, that idea and the idea of slowly losing yourself bit by bit instead of just a gradual fall, that's going to be talks for later, so I'm going to put a pin in it. But that really did some things for me, John.
Yeah, and you're dealing with. I mean, there's two sides of the coin too. You have Harry, who is trying to take the mantle and bludgeon it into his own framework, and then you have that opposite, the Padawan Molly, Harry's student, who is now the Winter Lady, the subordinate along with Harry under Mab, and Molly is fully embraced it to the point where I'm not even sure she's human anymore.
Well, she still has her humanity to a degree because it's explored throughout peace talks, and more so in Battleground over how she's struggling, kind of like Harry. She's actually playing a nice foil to Harry as far as their struggles between who they have to be and who they want to be, and finding themselves somewhere within the middle of that and walking that tight rope. Because not only is she a subordinate to Mab, John, but she is higher than Harry. She ranks extremely high. It's essentially how I picture the hierarchy when it comes to the Winter Court and also the Summer Court, is that the Winter Lady essentially is the person in training to take the mantle once Mab decides to step down or is killed. So it's essentially, I'm trying to think of like the royalty, like heir to the royal throne kind of a role. But that's probably the best I can come up with regarding that.
Yeah, and I think we could talk about it a little bit more because the real honest conversation about that's in Battleground, a little less so in peace talks. But it's I bring it up because there's a moment where Harry summons Molly to help him out with something. I'm just checking my notes here just so I have the right information. I mean, that's later on once, post the ambush at the, not ambush, the fire at Harry's apartment. And, she's not able to cross a closed summoning circle like mortals can. She is even more and more fae. Or fairy, whatever it was. in that instance, it was just more like Harry leaning into the fairiness that they find themselves stuck in, where he's asking for a favor in return for a favor. So I mean, maybe in that context, what he's asking of her is making her more fairy and less human, just because of A, the nature of the request, and B, how he asked her to show up.
Yeah, it's not like he called her on a well, he couldn't use a cell phone. It's not like he called her up or wrote her a letter. He summoned her like the mystical creature that she is becoming.
Yeah.
And that's again just a interesting play how they have to wear both hats simultaneously. And with Harry, he's still wearing three hats at this point because he's the Winter Knight, he is the soldier, as far as being in the White Court, and he's also a PI. But now that third hat is he's still trying to teach Molly a sense of like what's right and wrong in this mystical realm because she's still a novice.
Yeah, despite everything that they've gone through and despite how powerful she is, at the end of the day, she's still his student and he's still the teacher. And that's never really going to completely go away.
And speaking of that dynamic and the dynamic of teacher and student, John, I think we'll get into the plot a little bit more of Peace Talks. Essentially, I want to talk about Ebenezer, who was and still in some degree is the teacher of Harry and his grandfather.
Yeah, and it's a complicated relationship due to Harry's mother not being around as much as she probably could have been. If I recall, Harry was raised by his father for a period of time, and then upon his father's death was mentored by a dark magician named Justin Dumorn. And eventually his tutelage under Dumorn led to some really weird shit happening to Harry, almost ending up being a dead man because of it. So his relationship with McCoy was a little distant, but then it changed at a certain point once Ebenezer was able to teach him and live with, they lived with each other. And Ebenezer as the black staff, this I guess the assassin, or he
is like the literally the blunt instrument of the White Court. If the White Court of Mages has any sort of bad guy or boogeyman that has to be put down, they call him, and he comes in guns blazing and is so adept and inept at his fighting magic and just magic in general that he cleans house, and it's shown in Peace Talks. It shows its head in Battleground. But John, when it comes to Ebenezer McCoy, and again, this is leaking back to where I wish I could have read the series beforehand, because from my remembrance and talking about it now, as the books progress, the pillar in which Ebenezer McCoy in Harry's eyes, he starts to come off of that pillar. He starts to become more and more human. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and in a way, it is just like anybody else's, or any average person, I should say, their experience as they grow older, where the parent or the parental figure that you have, when you're a child, you view them as infallible, almost godlike, and then as you get older, you see how human your parents really are, and that they are subject to their own frustrations and angers and greeds and mistakes, and I think in Peace Talks, especially because there's not much interaction between them in Battleground, and we can talk about that choice later on. But the meat of the character interaction is here in Peace Talks. And I mean, in Ebenezer, essentially in my head, represents the entire fear of what the White Council has towards Harry, which is he's losing himself to the Winter Court.
Yeah. But can we just talk about how much the Winter Court, or not Winter Court, excuse me, how much the Council of White Wizards, the White Wizards are a bunch of just fucking assholes.
With like a few exceptions.
With a slight few exceptions, the majority of them are just, they've been in power for too long.
Yeah, it's I think what Butcher's trying to do here, it's a very I think it's a blunt metaphor as to what we here in the United States are experiencing right now with our system of government, where it is a bunch of old farts who honestly probably have stuck around too long.
Yep.
And I've done my share of research on it, and I don't think term limits are necessarily the answer, because it's a little bit more. I think the system has become a little bit more complicated than just saying, they have to be in office for 8 years and then that's it. I think, that opens up potential risk for, the lobbying to have more power. What I think Butcher's trying to do here is use that metaphor for, them being old farts who have no grasp of, how to be, I guess, considerate of modern sensibility. And I also think that he is setting up for another plot line later on, because we get mention of a black council.
Yes.
And that was something that was mentioned back a couple books back. I'm not exactly sure, but there's a belief between Harry and his grandfather that there are those in the White Council that are trying to manipulate situations into some sort of direction for some kind of nefarious reason, but we're not 100% sure what that is, besides power, and more death. And again, this is us hitting a wall of unfamiliarity, because it's been so long since we've gone top to bottom on these books.
Yeah, and what it reminded me of, John, is essentially in Star Wars. I'm going to use this metaphor. So if you think of the White Council of Wizards as the Empire, and you think of like Leia and all of the rest of the rebels who have to work within the system, and they know that there's this big ominous presence, they're like Harry and Ebenezer are like the rebels, and that they know that the White Council essentially is now the Empire, and that there's a few of them that are going to take the Empire to the next stage of like its development, essentially turning into like the First Order or some other even worse than the Empire. So Harry, Ebenezer, and a select other few know that there's a few bad apples, but overall that the system itself is dead or dying, or just set in their ways to the point of just stagnant death. I know it was a fucked up metaphor. I shouldn't have went with that, but essentially that's what I'm trying to get at.
I think you're on I think you're on a track. I just think that the track went a little bit different of a direction than either of us anticipated, because I think to work within that analogy is that I think that it's more like, and you're going to hate me for this, but I think it's more akin to what the Senate is in the prequel trilogy than it is anything we get in the original saga.
Yeah,
I think
that's way better. I see where you're going now. Way better.
It is absolutely a situation where, from the outside looking in, without knowing particular events, everything is business as normal. But subtle things start changing. More powers get taken away. More powers change. More people are under scrutiny than they would have been, maybe 5 years, a decade ago, a year ago. And it's a manipulation towards a certain side of thinking. And I think we also see that in the real world. I mean, we are dealing, for the last 4 years, we have been dealing with cries of fake news and misinformation, partly coming within the country, the U.S. itself, and coming from, outside actors like Russia. To use the comparison is a little rough, because I mean, in the prequels, I mean, the looking outside in, everything is business as normal, outside of the fact that we have to deal with an intergalactic war. And with war, that makes sense. We have to change some things just to deal with it. And then at a certain point, it's just whittling your people down bit by bit, taking small things away at a time, until at a certain point they've already given up so much that, what's one more thing? what's one more cruel thing that we can take, and just kind of walk by, just because we've already taken so much, and we're not. And the thing is, with the Black Council, we're not given much here because it's not the issue right now. So we don't really know more. We just know that somebody is trying to jostle Harry out of favor, and it's assumed to be whomever is on this Black Council. But I mean, with Ebenezer in this, I feel like he's less concerned with the Black Council, and this is I think the case for a lot of the Harry's friends and the Wardens, and and Ebenezer himself, is that they are afraid of what Harry is becoming, if anything.
Which there's some credence to, right? Because Harry is becoming, if he goes too much into the powers, then it does start to augment his own personality for the worse. He does become more cold. He starts to become less of a human being. But the last 4 or 5 books that he has been the Mantle of the Winter Court, he's kind of figured out that tight line to walk, John. That's why I'm like, dude, guys, give this motherfucker some slack. Because this guy is not only battling this fight inside himself, he's also saving your ass while saving Chicago's ass while saving the world's ass. He's going to be a grumpy asshole.
Yeah, it's just like, give him a fucking break. I mean, Jesus. I mean, and we have that interaction after Harry meets Laura Wraith. Is that the last right name? I don't remember.
Yeah, Wraith. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. For some reason it was just blanking on me. But the Ramirez and Yoshimo and all the other wardens, accost him, thinking, oh, he's turned to a thing of the fairy and a thing of the White Court vampires.
Yeah. It's like, dude, does nobody know how to have a fucking conversation, John? Does nobody be like, hey, Harry, are you good, man? Are you okay?
It's not like, and on top of that, it's not like we went to essentially war with you, fought side by side with you, lost friends with you.
Yeah, exactly.
We can't get, any benefit of the doubt is thrown away because Harry now is the magical equivalent of a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah, but that's the thing, John. They're looking at him as a weapon instead of going like, hey, Harry, dude, I know you had to take on the Mantle of the Winter Court. I understand why you had to do it. Or at least even if they didn't understand that, look, we know that you're the kind of guy that tries to have best intentions at heart, albeit the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but we know that you try to do whatever you're doing good intentions. Can we just have a conversation and let me tell you my thoughts and talk to me about what's going on? And again, I think this was brought up in peace talks, John.
I mean, with Ramirez, there is certainly the attempt, but it is that the fear of what Harry is now, I think, keeps overriding any human tendency to just hash it out and just converse. And it's not just their fault. It's Harry's dumb pride.
Right. No, I'm not saying Harry's a clean angel with the slate, right? He obviously cranks it up once they start pressing him. But if Ramirez, for example, in peace talks were just as hey, man, let's talk. How's it going? How's life?
Let's get a beer.
What's going on, man? What's your life? Why is it spinning this way? Instead of just oh, the White Council of Wizards needs your help, Harry. You know what it is, John? It's those 80s cliche movies where they're like, God damn it, MacGyver. You're the only one who can save this day, even though you're a renegade cop who doesn't play by the rules. We need you to win one for the Gipper.
I can't do it for the Gipper. He gipped me too much.
Exactly. That's exactly what the dynamic is, and that's why it just frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah. And what gets me more is that everybody just jumps to the worst possible conclusion.
Oh yeah.
That's I think one of the things that frustrated me a little bit more about this book, and what came before is that, and I think I'm just repeating my point, but it's like nobody is literally giving any consideration that they do give to the past history of what everybody has gone through together is cursory at best, because they are more afraid of whatever potential threat might be there.
Now, John, you brought up an interesting point there that just made me think. Do you think that Butcher intentionally did this to have this as a vehicle of sort of friction or conflict, or do you think it's been so long since Butcher wrote in these books? Because again, Butcher took a sabbatical, if we can call it that, between books, that he was just like, I don't exactly quite remember the dynamics of these characters, so let me just write in this angle because it's going to be the fuse to light the fire of a future huge conflict.
I would disagree. I think he's too talented a writer to just ignore things that he set out before. And this is me. I'm saying this without any knowledge of how he is charting out what his characters think and feel. But I think, you talking about that made me think of something that, Harry had a relationship with a female warden. Her name is escaping me. But she was the Italian one.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that he was never really in a relationship with her. It was somebody controlling her. And she, when that was all resolved, she had no real remembrance of being with Harry. But for Harry, it was still very much a full-fledged relationship. And while she acknowledged that, it was just like, I can't give you that because it was never mine to develop. So maybe what's happening is Black Court, Black Council shit. It is, manipulation. It is subtle pushes, harboring, and fostering people's fears just because the person that they knew isn't the person that they knew when they fought with him last. And I think another thing that I feel like we might not be considering is that we don't know how much time is passing here.
Right. That's fair.
With peace talks and Battleground, that's easy. They're literally moments after each other,
right,
or moments before, moments after. Skin Game was a couple years ago in our reality. For Harry, it might just be a year. And Anthony, I think you'd agree that people can change a lot within a year.
Oh, absolutely. I do. I agree with that, and I can contend to that. And also, that's a part on me not remembering, right? Because it's been, God, John, I can't remember when I actually. Well, I know I didn't read it. I listened to our beautiful, beautiful narrating voice of James Marsters read it to me magnificently as he does. So, but again, it's been. At that, it's been at least 5 years, 6 years, 7, close to 10, probably damn near.
Yeah, but I think I want to pivot back a little bit to Ebenezer. We're still within the same thought line here, but I mean, a lot of his interaction, the two major interactions he has with Harry towards the beginning of the novel and at the big climax, is his fear on what's happening with Harry and the Winter Council, the Winter Court, and the White Court of Vampires, and Ebenezer not letting go of his rage towards the White Court for what they did to Harry's mother,
right?
And Harry not giving, not being able to check his own pride and admit things to his grandfather in order to tell him, hey, there is more here than you ever realized, and you are going to be causing a lot of dangerous shit if you push me and you push the situation like this,
right? Which is ultimately what happens, right?
Yeah, I mean, and at that point, it is just become shit that happens because Harry and Ebenezer didn't just sit down and start talking to each other.
Didn't just have a fucking conversation, John.
And you know what gets me is that, like, is that first conversation with Ebenezer in the apartment,
Right.
and he almost scares the shit out of Maggie.
Right.
And it's just like,
well, part of that is Maggie's traumatized to strangers essentially after all she's gone through. Like that, I'm not going to blame that on Ebenezer because that's a thing that, unfortunately, this poor child has been traumatized through literally all the shit that has gone down. And I can only remember like a fraction, let alone, every little thing that's happened to poor Miss Dresden.
Maggie,
thank you. I forgot the first name.
Yeah, you're all good, buddy. So I mean let's talk about forgive us folks, we're kind of jumping around, but we're talking about more abstract character moment stuff because honestly I feel that's what Peace Talks is, which is there's the larger like world situation going on of the peace talks between all of these different magical nations. But honestly, the meaty stuff for me is the character stuff, and I know that's the same.
Yeah, I agree. Again, because I couldn't tell you why Harry's locked up in this, not prison, but this headquarters of the Falmore. Was it the Falmore? No, Falmore.
No. It's the those elves. The Spartolves.
Yeah. Again, like I couldn't tell you why, so I was just at that point just going for the characters and going for interactions and stuff like that.
Well, if it helps, that apartment actually belongs to Molly. And
Harry, that does help because I can't even remember that.
Yeah, this is back in like cold days. So Molly has this apartment. He's staying there and it's part of the Svartalf embassy, and the Svartalfs keep that embassy in Chicago to liaise with the local supernatural community. So they're just a group of fairy craftsmen, and they are just in alliance with the Winter Court. But let's go back to Ebenezer, and we'll talk about that fight on the dock, because boy, that was a shitstorm.
Yes.
So I mean, like at that point, we've gone through all of the machinations that Harry needed to do to help his brother, which
machinations.
All right.
Sorry, that's all I have to add.
That's all right. And we'll get to what happened. Well, I think we'll get to Thomas next, because that we're naturally kind of setting that up because this fight necessarily involves Thomas as a whole, because Thomas does some fucked up shit. And for those at home, Thomas is Harry's half brother, who is a white vampire. But Anthony, what did you think of that fight with Ebenezer, the argument leading up to, and then the fight and the aftermath?
So the argument, which started off in the apartment, then Harry says, "Hey, let's just go take a walk." And
then get into a giant fight with evil monsters.
Right. Yeah, eventually.
Which is, how this series goes. It's like, let's take a walk, and they fall into some horrible shit that they have to finagle their way out of.
That's just a Dresden Files trope at this point, right? Like, it just happens. So the conversation...
I just wanted to address it because it is part of the structure of the series, but I mean, outside of they fight good together, there's not much character stuff to talk about. So Anthony, please continue.
Yeah, so essentially they're still kind of talking about Ebenezer wants to take Dresden's child somewhere safe, like a safety house or safe house or something, and Harry's like, "Dog, I'm the Winter Knight, like no one's gonna fuck with my kid, and the kid's been pushed away enough, and the last thing she needs is her daughter or her father to isolate her like I was isolated by my family, etc."
Yeah.
So they're discussing that, and Ebenezer's getting pissed. He's like, "Oh, you're in league with the Winter Court. You're in league with the vampires, who are the sworn enemy of the state, if you will. I mean, not in so many words, but they're the sworn enemy of everybody." And then that's when they see something shoot out of the sky, hit the ground, and Ebenezer goes, "Ah, fuck."
Yeah. And at that point, it becomes just a giant shitstorm of magical bullshit.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's just,
I mean,
it's a huge whirlwind of a fight. Ebenezer's, what I appreciate about it is it highlighted Ebenezer's skills as, and even Harry's like, yes, this is why this man is known as the Black Staff. This is why it reminds me of, again, to kind of bring back to another author of ours, Sanderson, when they talk about the Blackthorn and how much of a fucking badass he is in combat. When you actually get to see him in combat and you're like, oh yeah, that's why he's the fucking Blackthorn. Like that's essentially had the same moment for me.
Yeah. And I mean, Ebenezer is pretty much the winner. And the only way Harry wins is by revealing, hey, you have another grandson and he's a white vampire and I'm trying to save his dumbass, but your dumbass won't let me do it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, now we're, yes. Essentially it was a low blow by Harry.
Yeah. And Harry knew it.
Yeah.
That's what makes it worse.
And Harry knew it. It was a low blow, but it was one that he had to, because he knew if it was going to be a long. What I appreciate about that scene, John, is, now forgive me if I'm wrong, because I'm mixing up scenes and I'm mixing up talks and mixing up the scenes in my head. But is this where Harry starts talking about how wizards fight and how like most wizard fights are within like 10 minutes? And if it's more drawn out than that, then you're fucked.
Yeah, there is a conversation like that, or at least with Harry to us.
It's an inner monologue that Harry's talking about that. And what I appreciated is why it highlights the fighting between Ebenezer and Harry as far as throwing magic around. Because again, like this scene feels like it goes on for hours, but in all actuality, this is all blowing together in like 5 minutes. And it's just, Harry knows he's outgunned from the start. And I love how he's like, look, in a normal battle, I'm pretty up there when it comes to these wizard duels. People don't want to fuck with me because I can end them because, you know, instead of cutting people like with finesse with a fine knife, I'm a sledgehammer when it comes to my magical abilities. But I'm a sledgehammer going up against, a concrete 50-foot wall of China in black.
It has knives sticking out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Against Ebenezer McCoy. Like, a sledgehammer can maybe break down a portion of the Great Wall of China. It's not going to destroy the entire wall.
Yeah, there's no way Harry was going to win. So the whole premise of the fight was playing dirty, because you have the reveal to Ebenezer that you have a second grandson, and it's the thing that you hate the most. A white court vampire, and then Harry. We're shown Harry had set this up the whole time. It was an ectoplasm fake body that he had Molly make for him, and it was just a distraction so that they can get away long enough to Demon Reach in the middle of the lake, just so that they can actually do something for Thomas.
Yeah. Now, for the folks listening at home who have hopefully read these books by now or read this book by now, John and I are not doing a concise breakdown of, and then chapter 1, this happened, and then chapter 2, this happened. We are talking bigger themes. The scene we're talking about is literally like the end of Battlegrounds, or excuse me, the end of Peace Talks.
Peace Talk.
And again, John already eloquently put this, but I'm just reaffirming that, guys, we're kind of going with themes here. We're not going with just chronological order here, because there's a bunch of shit that happened way before.
Yeah, and we're not even talking about the big thing that kind of broke the Peace Talks. At that point, I mean, we'll get to that thing in a minute. But since we're talking about Thomas, Anthony, you want to talk about Thomas?
Yeah, so you don't get a lot of Thomas in this book. And by that, I mention, like, I remember in the previous books, he is in the book either half the time, if not 75% of the time.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if Harry is Batman, I would say that Thomas is essentially his Nightwing.
Exactly, 100%.
That it is, and that, not to bring in the complicated relationships of Batman, because at any given moment you can look at a book and see, oh, this is Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson acting like father and son, or it is the two of them acting like brothers, and that's interchangeable. I mean, with here it is essentially they are brothers and they bicker like brothers, but there is that brotherly love, especially the fact that they know that they are the only two that they have, despite how complicated Thomas's life is because of his nature as a white vampire.
It's honestly, John, it's like Supernatural, right? Sam and Dean. It's essentially that kind of same dynamic to a sense, even though in my humble opinion, they are way more developed than Sam and Dean are as far as characters.
I mean, you get
Sam,
Dean!
Sam,
Dean! Dean!
and that's how it goes for 13 seasons.
I mean, my fiance and your wife would probably disagree, but we will deal with that respectively, and I will see you in the afterlife when they murder us both.
John, we both know they're not going to listen to this.
Probably not. So, I mean, with Thomas shows up at the beginning, and he's training with Harry. You know, they're having a nice run on a beach.
Yeah, which I'm like, is this supposed to be a Rocky 4 moment? Or not Rocky 4, like a Rocky 3 moment?
You know, if I know Dresden, if I know Butcher, probably.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here. It's like da 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 na na na.
No, it would be Eye of the Tiger because that's Rocky 3.
Oh God, that's right, Rocky 3. That's right.
So, and you know, throughout the entire series, Justin has been very involved with a young woman named Justine, who is essentially his main squeeze. And
Wait, did you say Thomas or did you say Justin? I think you said Justin.
Thomas, yes. I think I crossed the streams.
Yeah, and which is easy to do.
Yeah. So, to correct myself, Thomas has been involved throughout the majority of the books with a young woman named Justine, who is his main squeeze. She is, you know, and as a white vampire, he is a energy draining vampire. So, for those of you who have seen What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show, he is a Colin Robinson. He drains people's energy.
Yes.
Anthony, I don't know if you've seen that show.
No.
You should. You would love it.
Okay.
You would also love that movie. So that's homework for you. Watch those. But a brief explanation of the white vampires. They feed off energy, usually sexual energy. So they're usually involved very intimately with a number of partners, but in certain circumstances they pick one partner and are very close with that person. Justine is Thomas's person, and we learn that she's pregnant, Anthony, and that's a big fucking deal.
Yeah, and we learned this literally, it was like chapter 1, chapter 2, like
Yeah.
within the first third of the book for sure. And Harry's taken aback because essentially, John, from my understanding, Harry's like, yeah, that's not supposed to happen with vampires.
And he's like, I know, but it did. I mean, at the other thing is that I'm a supposing. I don't know why I turned Italian, or an Italian stereotype, I should say. I'm supposing Thomas is half human, half.
Yes, he is half
vampire. So maybe I don't know. We're
was
talking
it like
about
one testicle's human, one testicle's vampire? How's that work?
I don't know. I don't know fictional biology. So somehow he's gotten Justine pregnant. And he's freaking
John,
the hell out of it.
You missed the epic joke there. Damn it, Anthony! I'm a lawyer, not a doctor.
Damn it! I mean, I almost did it, but it just.
We've already crossed way too many science fiction streams.
I know. That's the problem. Damn it, Jim. I'm a podcaster, not a doctor. I can only handle so many things at once. That sounds dirtier.
It could have been a contender. Let's just throw Let's just throw all of them in there.
Cut me, Nick. Just cut me.
So let's talk about Harry and Thomas and this revelation of Thomas going to be a daddy.
Yeah, he is frightened as fuck, and Harry can identify with that because again, he still has the same feelings. Being a parent is a scary thing, man. You're now all of a sudden in charge of this tiny thing, this tiny person that it literally looks to you for every answer, to have every answer. It looks to you for comfort, for, to be sheltered, to be cared for, to be loved, to have, become the ultimate Obi-Wan Kenobi figure that you can ever be. And so Thomas, again, doesn't have the best history. didn't have a great relationship with his parents, doesn't have a great relationship with his family unit, so he doesn't really have anyone to look to outside of Harry. And Harry's like, yeah, dude, I'm kind of fucked up too, but look, as long as you love the kid, as long as you give your damnedest to do what you can to guide them in whatever the right way is, then you're fine.
And I think the point Harry's trying to make is there is no right way per se. The right way is to try.
Yeah. Exactly.
And to be there and to listen to the kid. The worst thing that could be done is that you just run away from it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and it kind of, all of that comes up against what we learn later is that Thomas murders the head of the Svartalfs where Harry is staying and causes a diplomatic incident.
Yeah, but even before that, like, Harry knows something's up with him. Outside even the whole pregnancy, he just knows because Thomas just isn't right. And again, they've grown close enough as brothers, well, as friends, and then, you know, finding out they're brothers, that he's like, yeah, dude, something's up with you. But, you know, Thomas is being very coy about it. He's like, hey, you know, just whatever happens, just know I love you. Just know that, you know, blah, blah, blah. He's giving them that kind of, like, speech. So Harry knows something's up. And then all of a sudden, yeah, bada bing, bada boom, he kills the head of the people, the elvish people who, you know, he's under the care of, essentially.
Yeah, and a very aggressive sequence where, you know, an apartment building is on fire, people have been murdered, and Harry's daughter and one of the carpenter girls who was babysitting Maggie is stuck in a building on fire.
Yeah, and instantly Dresden didn't know that.
Yeah.
You know, didn't know what exactly was happening. He just sees the building's on fire and his daughter is in that building. And goes,
yeah, and you know, he saves the day, of course, but and the discovery that Thomas is the cause for all of this, it throws him aback, and it becomes, you know, a quest to deal with, you know, now Harry's dealing with a couple different plates. He's dealing with his obligations to Mab as one. He's dealing with his obligations to the White Council as a warden as another. He's dealing with keeping Maggie safe. And now he has to deal with the mess Thomas has left him. And that means dealing with a certain somebody that I guess Harry might have some complicated emotion toward.
His sister, well, not his, his brother's sister, Laura
Wraith, leader of she's ostensibly the head of the White Court vampires, and again, like I said earlier, the White Court vampires feed off energy, and it's usually sexual, and she tries to put some whammies on some Harrys.
Yeah, and we come to find, and this is when I started to realize that something was going to happen between the two of them, John. Like, I just knew it. I knew that something was going to happen because Butcher was trying to put these two together a little too hard.
And I think we can put a pin in that until we get to Battleground. Because, I mean, at this point, I felt like it was just, you know, her being who she is, which is just a vampire. But at the end of the day, I think that we both can agree that Laura and Harry's goal is helping Thomas.
Yes, they both have a common goal. They both have a shared interest to trying to make sure that Thomas comes out on top. But John, speaking of on top, boy, that sexual chemistry, that sexual tension, though.
Yeah, he especially here, there, you know, because Battleground doesn't, you know, until the end we don't really get more follow up on that. But here is that the setup for stuff of that. You know, they have a conversation. There's a couple conversations.
Yeah, actually, when one of the conversations they have, which I was thankful for, is Dresden accused Laura of putting her sexual wiles on him using her sexy vampire stare, whatever. Mm-hmm. And Laura's like, no, it's we don't always use this power. Sometimes it just happens when we're attracted to people who we find, a proper mate or a proper whatever. So I appreciate a little tidbit that it's like, oh, so this is a natural reaction sometimes. It's not just a little trick that they pull.
Yeah, it's not a whim.
It's not a whim. Like, this is an actual thing that happens with these people. And I'm like, okay, cool. That actually dives a little bit more into the lore. It lets us know that vampires do have feelings too.
Yeah. We also learned that Laura has been working with Mab, the Winter Queen, and the Winter Court owes the White Court some favors.
Does they ever?
Yeah. So, and Mab personally assigns Harry to deal with it. So he is whatever Laura wishes. The Winter Court will have to grant it. And the first one is, of course, having to deal with, saving Thomas.
Yes. Now, John, what I was having a hard time figure out, and again, this is just, I know I keep harkening back to this theme, but this is me just going like, shit, I should have read all the books. What was the reasoning behind the White Court owing Laura some favors?
That is a great question.
Yeah, because I couldn't remember. They were just like, Mab was like, oh yeah, we owe this bitch some favors, so go do some shit for her.
I think it has something to do with larger. I don't know if it was something that came out of Skin Game, the previous book, which
see, that's the hell of the thing. I'm just like,
my notes aren't detailed enough, and I think I'd have to dive back into the conversation with the three of them about what exactly they're owed, because the plot point I have here is that the Winter Court owes 3 favors to Laura, and 2 of them are dealt with here. We get 2 situations resolved, 2 wishes here granted, and then the third one becomes complicated. But that's a conversation for Battleground. Right. I think it's just Laura trying to well, actually I found some notes.
Oh,
yay internet. Visa issues. So it looks like the White Court helped the Winter Court with some paperwork bullshit of some vague description, and the fairy queen has decided, okay, that means I owe you something, so that I'm going to give you these 3 things.
So it's not even some grand gesture. It's like, all right, you gave us some fucking fake IDs.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it's just the nature of what we're given isn't specific enough.
I know. I'm just being an asshole, John.
I know. You're comedy for comedy's sake, buddy. I get it. But it's putting Harry again in this situation where he keeps getting these plates he has to juggle. Now he has to deal with the sexy ass vampire in front of his face.
Right.
Which, I mean, in a normal situation wouldn't be that bad of a problem.
Yeah, but literally in his face, because at one point they have to, trying to bust Thomas out, they have stripped naked, and it's all thrown.
Well, I mean, it's all part of a simulation, a magical simulation of them fornicating in a locker room.
Yeah, but they still get into their skivvies and roll around.
Yeah, that is also true.
But one cool thing was that even though the vampires prey on the sexual nature of humans or other creatures to feed, if you will, for the White Court, they can't feed on people who are actually genuinely in love and just made love to somebody that they actually truly love. I hate that I use love 17 times, but you know what I'm trying to say, John.
I do, Anthony. And to be honest, you just gave me a perfect setup to talk about one of the best characters in this fucking series.
I know. I tried to give you a clean one too, but it just didn't come out that clean.
It's clean enough. Kieran Murphy, Anthony, Harry's former police liaison and now paramour. They are finally hooked up. They are a couple now, but Murphy is fucked up because she went through some shit in Skin Game.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, we're dealing, in Skin Game, that was in part dealing with machinations of a bunch of assholes who have evil coins that belong to Judas, the 30 pieces of silver, the Knights of the Silver Denarius, or whatever the hell they're called. They're assholes. They're absolute assholes.
Just absolute bad guys. They're essentially if you think of the Knights of the Holy Cross as the Jedis of this world, they are the absolute Sith.
Yes, perfect way to explain it. And like, I felt bad for Murphy here because when we first come back to her with Harry, she is like still in the midst of recovery, and it's not going to be a neat recovery. She isn't going back to 100%. She is.
No, they don't even know if she can even walk again, John. Essentially, that's how fucked up she is.
Yeah, and on top of everything else we've talked about, the Chicago PD are on after.
Fuck those guys, dude.
Oh, fuck them so much.
Fuck them. Well, minus the partner to Rudolph. Is it Randolph or is it Rudolph?
It's Rudolph is the dickhead.
Rudolph, yes.
Bradley is the guy who's trying to do his job.
Yeah, Bradley's just like, dude, I'm trying to do a job. I'm trying to give you subtle hints and clues, but ultimately I have a job to do. And what I'm having a hell of a time trying to figure out is how does fucking Rudolph at this point go through as much supernatural bullshit, see people get torn apart as a rookie in Full Moon.
Yeah.
By the Loup-de-Grou, the werewolf creature, if you will. And yet is just like, nah, this shit's not happening. I'm in denial. Yes.
Yes. Denial isn't only a river in Egypt.
Yeah. Just fuck that guy, man.
Yeah, and we there will be more fuck yous for that guy later on, but I mean, it's a plot. I mean, it's a plot point that I feel like that is just there to complicate the situation. At least in my opinion, it just like in the scope of things, what the Chicago PD wants is very much low on the list of priorities.
Oh, big time. They're literally upon the edge of Judgment Day, lapping the shore of Chicago, and they're like, "Excuse me, you have to answer for the murder of a bad guy back in Skin Game." Well,
you're actually incorrect. It is, I think it was a minor, and it was an innocent man. He was just there, unfortunately. I think.
So I think you're probably right, but what I'm trying to say, John, is defund the virtual fantastical Chicago PD in this.
Yeah, this situation, it was just like, I think it was there to give Harry an excuse to see Murphy and to give that confirmation. Yeah, they are romantically involved. They love each other. It is a committed thing. But Murphy is not in a good place, and
not at all. Yeah,
and I was a little afraid because she's forcing herself to meet the requirements of the situation, even though her body is not anywhere near up meeting it. And to me, it's just a bad sign of things to come. That was my feeling of it.
Yeah, I knew by how hard she's trying to push herself, because she's a warrior. She's straight up a warrior. She is
tiny but fierce.
Yeah, exactly. She is going to not only just a warrior for being a warrior's sake, she's a protector. She's a defender. Yeah. Like, she just doesn't have the badge to pin on as an accessory. Like, she is actually trying to save Chicago and save the world, like one case at a time, one person at a time. And it's a very admirable thing. But a lot of times, people like that, John, is they push themselves well past their limits to the point where they don't let themselves recover. And they don't understand that I need to take these 6 months off to recover, or else I won't be able to be worth a damn. So they always run head first, which, again, it's admirable. She's a cop. I get it. But it leads to so many bad things.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, and I think we might have to put a pin in that.
We're gonna
for
definitely
battlegrounds, but
for sure.
I think like I am a little frustrated though because I feel like Murphy has turned from the Buffy-esque Sarah Michelle Gellar type, because that's how I picture Murphy, as Sarah Michelle Gellar for whatever reason.
That's a good comparable, like a Hispanic Catholic Sarah Michelle Gellar in Buffy.
Yeah, something like that. But it's just like I feel like she went from.
Or was she Italian? I know she was Catholic. I couldn't remember.
I thought she was Irish. But a name like Murphy, come on.
I know she's Catholic for sure, so it could be Irish.
Yeah, Irish Catholic.
Maybe I just
Chicago.
Yeah, maybe just made up the Hispanic part because I'm all for our people of color raising up and kicking ass.
Yeah, what I think you're doing is mixing up the mother of Maggie, Susan Delgado.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I am, John. And just talk. It was just me saying, Harry's got a type.
Yeah, definitely. So I feel like the character has changed from being an independent person to being that supportive girlfriend character. I mean, I don't know. It's like I feel like the decision making is a little bit beyond Murphy's physical grasp now, and she's doing it because it's the right thing to do, and she's going to do the right thing. But it's just but previously it was she had to get the information first. Now it is all about just trusting what is being told.
Well, John, that's what love is, right?
Yeah.
When you love somebody, you trust them that they're always going to have the best intention at heart. You're going to essentially, you're going to follow them into the depths of hell, riding the sidecar next to them. Like, what it really means to love somebody is, you're going to fight with them when you need to fight with them. You're going to try to press back when ideas are dumb or press back when situations are dumb. But ultimately speaking, if you truly love somebody, you're going to stand next to them, no matter what hell they face, no matter whatever the odds may be. And that's what, and with Murphy being a protector, being a defender, it made natural sense for her to cut the cast off of her legs and go, nah, come hell or high water, man. We're going to see this fucking thing through, Harry.
No.
It's not like she hasn't fought supernatural forces before, man. Like, just with like a fucking 9mm or some other weapon or arsenal, she's gone up against some fucking shit. Like, she took the goddamn... Yeah, dude, she took the sword of fucking the Holy Cross or whatever and started fucking shit up in one of the books. That's like one of my memories of her from this series. It's just taking that sword and fucking shit up.
Yeah, I think that was the last book, and then I honestly thought she was being set up for status as a knight of the cross, and then I'm just a little bit bitter that she doesn't get to be literally on that level of where because I feel like the knights are comparable to where Harry is. There might be a little bit of a difference, but that is literally as pure equal as you can get. And I think Murphy deserved that.
I think she did too, John, but ultimately I don't think she could have been a knight, because while she does have pure of heart, she does some sketchy shit with Harry, right? Like, Harry would have taken her away from that path and corrupted her.
Because he's a dirty whore.
God damn it. Yes, I mean, yes, he is. But it's because she doesn't really have the right state of mind at times, just like we never do when somebody we love. And we don't question a lot of their shady motives, and we follow with them when sometimes we shouldn't have. And ultimately, to be a knight of the Holy Cross, you have to have faith. And in general, I like how they do that order. It's not like you have to have faith in God and just know all your Bible scriptures from heart. It's like, no, dude, you just have to have faith that what you're doing and who you're protecting is good. And you have to have faith that you are going to make the right decision no matter what. And normally Murphy could say that she does that, but just given most of her history, especially the more she gets intimate with Harry, she does some shady shit. Like Skin Game, she does some shady shit, man.
Yeah, the Skin Game, I think, is the best example of it, where it is a situation where it is very ethically questionable as to whether or not any of them should have been doing what they were doing. But I mean, in that situation, Harry had, again, no choice. It was, another requirement of the Winter Night, and goes back to something you mentioned earlier. It's just giving up your soul by inches instead of by miles.
And John, when we start talking about Battlegrounds, as I was previously muted there, I am very excited to talk about that particular, because my respect for Mab, it went from, this evil witch from all these books previously to like, oh shit, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. She goes, I mean, like when Harry became the Winter Knight, that was interesting, in part due to how that ritual worked.
That was him and Mab, right? Like that wasn't. Yeah. Okay, I thought so.
Yeah, and it was her very forcefully binding him to that.
Yes,
and that is I mean, partly it's because it's the I think the fear that any woman would have, where it is the power taken away from you. That is what that scene was, where Mab is taking everything away from Harry and saying you're mine, and always going to be mine.
Yeah, it was not. I know there's a lot of sex in these books, John, and not like it's not like it's not like it, True Blood or any of those series. Although a lot of these books ran parallel. That was probably the most uncomfortable sex scene, because it wasn't even like a consensual sex at that point. It was an assault. It was consensual to a point because Harry had to give his consent to become the Winter Knight, but it was under pretenses that were not like, it was either you have to do this or this person is going to seriously get fucked,
and you die,
and so
and you die.
So it was just kind of icky to begin with, and this is many books ago, obviously, but it was just.
I think at the end of the day, I think what we can call Harry's experience as the Winter Knight is, and I apologize for the bluntness of the phrase, but it's a spiritual rape by inches.
Yeah.
It is.
You have that initial the moment where he became the knight, or just as he progressed.
Both. I mean the sexual interaction with Mab.
That was close akin to a rape, honestly.
Yeah, that is, on its nose exactly what it is. It is, somebody exerting power over somebody else so that they can get what they want. In that case, it is more than just sex. It is a magical ritual, but it is Harry being forced into a position where he has to give up something in order to stay in the game. And Mab gets what she wants, which is, a very powerful weapon.
Yes.
And she's going to take that weapon, put it in some kind of icy fire, and start forging it.
Yes, and which leads to the culmination of what happens in Battleground ultimately, which is amazing. But
and we get to we get to the stuff that we're dealing with here outside of Harry trying to save Thomas, which is, and I think we've kind of buried the lead enough. I think we have to talk about the peace talks themselves.
Yeah. So essentially, the peace talks is to keep going. From my remembrance, essentially, it's supposed to make sure that the balance of power is equally shared to where there's not going to be an outcry of bloodshed in the streets.
Yeah.
Of the world, even, really, not just the streets, but just in the world.
Yeah, it's just Chicago is just turning into this focal point of all of that. We're talking, and the peace talks are with the people who have agreed to a thing called the Unseelie Accords, which are essentially not, an equivalent to the Geneva Conventions, but for magic people. It is meant to, it ties together the vampires, the wizards, the Denarians, the Vatarungs.
Yeah, it's the rules of etiquette, the rules of hospitality. Hospitality. Thank you. It's the rules of hospitality that everyone has to follow, or else like it's free reign to just murder and kill each other in these specific moments. So without these set of rules, these societal rules that they play by, literally the world would be in chaos. And
because the magical realms would just be at war with each other and out in the open in the human world, and the human world as it is now can't withstand that at all. And for everybody's safety, it is better to try and come into some kind of agreement. And so, with the absence of the Red Court vampires, that's upset. And now the point of these peace talks are to try and put things back together. And we're introduced to a lot of people here. We meet Laura's Valkyrie bodyguard, who
oh man, she's the fucking best.
I think we could talk about her and the Butters situation together because they're kind of comparable.
Yeah, so the Butters situation, we come to find out that, and this is after the Ebenezer and Harry fight the demons from a different universe. He's getting stitched up by Butters, and come to find out, Butters is in a throuple, which for those of the uninitiated, that's slang term for a polyamorous relationship between multiple individuals. Yes. So Butters is in a throuple with these two werewolf chicks that we are introduced to at some point in these 15 books that are out there that I wish I would have read beforehand, because I was like, I know you're a werewolf, so I was probably introduced to you in the second book, Full Moon, but I don't really remember your character arc.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that happens with a lot of the werewolves throughout the books, because they are recurring characters, and we are essentially checking up with them in their lives every time we start another file in the Dresden files, which might be a sequel to the Columbo files for all we know. But I mean, that's kind of crazy because Waldo Butters is, now one of the Knights of the Cross, and I don't know of any Catholic who would say, okay, he's with two women and they're with each other and they're all three and doing some kind of thing. That doesn't seem within the confines of, religion. But to go back to what you said, Anthony, religion doesn't necessarily apply to faith.
Yeah. And that's what I appreciate about what you're doing with this. It's not like we have to follow this credo. They're all paladins, but essentially it's a paladin that doesn't have to follow a specific god or a specific credo. The credo is just do good and be good and protect.
Exactly.
And again, the misconception of polyamorous relationships are out there. They're in the minority, but people can have healthy relationships and have multiple people in a relationship and have it be okay and have it be fine. No, is it your traditional sense of one person and one person in one relationship? No, it's not. It's something, of an outlier, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing or it's an evil thing or it's a thing. It's just a different perspective. It's a different way of looking at it. And there are some misconceptions about it, but ultimately if all individuals involved in this kind of relationship are willing participants and are willing to try to do what's best for the relationship, and with all members and with all the love and all of the goodness spread evenly amongst all the members, this can be a healthy type of relationship.
Yeah. And to be honest, we're not really given much.
No. And even Butters is like, dude, I'm still trying to figure this out, Harry. If you say anything, I swear to God, I'm going to mess you up.
Yeah, which is like, okay, good on you, Butters, for setting some ground rules. Also, Butcher, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, but I appreciate that interaction because Harry's like, look, Butters is like, no, I'm like 6'9". Butters is like 5'7", like super small dude. But the way he's like, but I can't remember exactly the line, but Harry goes, there's sometimes when a person really says quietly or looks at you a certain way, says, I'm going to mess you up. they actually mean it. And in that moment, I felt Butters. I heard his words, saw how he said it, and I knew he meant it, so I left it alone. And I appreciated that.
Yeah, no, and that speaks to the growth that Butters has had, but in the time of getting his lightsaber holy sword, and where we find him now in a throuple, which I would like to just get more context for how this works later on. So, maybe, but I mean, it's not necessarily a requirement. It's just like, you can't dangle this kind of fish in front of me and then just yank it away without giving me a little bit more information.
I honestly, John, at this point, I couldn't even remember Butters' arc, like I mentioned, let alone these werewolves character arcs. So I'm like, yeah, okay. That's something I gotta have to read up on to try to figure out even how they all met, let alone how they got into this relationship.
Yeah, fair. And I think we could talk about Freitas Guard, your favorite person.
Freitas Guard.
The bodyguard,
yes,
the Valkyrie.
I know. Just the name never fits with me. Like, honestly, in my head, like, this is just Valkyrie. This person is just Valkyrie. That is their name. Because their name, like, just for some reason would not stick in my brain. I could have this mental image of who this person looks like, what they look like, how they're portrayed. Just their name could never stick. So in my head, it's Valkyrie.
Yeah, and like so many other people in this book, man, is she horny.
Yeah, I appreciate that Butcher adds this aspect to individuals because this is a part of people, right? Sexuality is a normal part of everyone. But at times, it's just a little too much.
Yeah.
It can just be overbearing, but I'm not saying that her sexuality, Valkyrie, her sexuality is overbearing. I'm just saying that at times that theme can be, because honestly, how Valkyrie hits on Karen, goes about it is a funny way. It's a nice, fun thing. But it's just overall in the theme of sexuality, not necessarily in this book, but like in previous books. Because again, this was running parallel with True Blood, with those shitty Anna Rice novels?
Anne Rice,
excuse me. Anne Rice novels from, back in the early aughts, mid-aughts. Yeah. So I get it, but it can be a little too much. But Valkyrie uses it. It's just perfect. I love this character. I love this character so much, John.
Yeah, it is like, at the end of the day, it's ultimately just like a comedy bit to throw Harry and Murph off a little bit.
Oh, I love the line where I texted you this line too, John. The line of the book.
Yes, you did.
The line of the book, how it reads is, Valkyrie looks at Karen and goes, "Hey," because Karen does some amazing like fighting skill or something. So Valkyrie, as a Valkyrie, looks at her with respect because they're all about combat and they're all about the warrior mindset. And they're like, "Hey," so Valkyrie comes up to Karen. It's like, "Hey, what are you doing later?" And like Karen kind of like turns red in the face, looks at Dresden, and Valkyrie goes, "Oh, I don't mind." Like, oh, I don't mind sharing. And then Karen goes, I'm Catholic." And then Valkyrie, with a twinkle in her eye, looks back at Murphy and says, "Oh, I don't mind complicated either." Just that fucking line, I just died laughing. Like, just fucking the perfect response to counteract somebody who throws that at you.
Yeah, it's just like when Dresden when the books do comedy, it's honestly just, it's the perfectly timed bit for that moment.
Perfect. Yeah, when Butcher writes the comedy in these series, it, like I said, for the most part, I'd say about 97% of the time, it just hits like this. It's like boom, perfectly paced, perfectly timed.
Absolutely. So I think we can move from Valkyrie to kind of more of the end game stuff to kind of wrap this up, because we didn't really talk about what happened to Thomas at the end of this, and we haven't really talked about how the peace talks themselves go. In short, not well.
Yeah, no, it was all just a facade, really. Like,
Yeah.
the peace talks themselves, everything was fine.
Until
Besides it becoming a heist movie, trying to get Thomas out of the base, out of the dungeon, if you will.
Yeah.
But the talks themselves, everyone's still amicable. Everyone's still like, okay, we're gonna keep the peace, whatever have you, until the Falmer arrive and just fuck shit up and say, nah, y'all need to go back to the old ways where humankind feared us. And we need to go back. And then the Titan is amongst the Falmer. And apparently, John, the Titan was one of the Titans of Zeus.
Like, well, yes and no. Eithnu, I think I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It's a little tricky to pronounce. She's a Celtic Titan, and she wields the Eye of Balor, who was her father, and Balor is part of Celtic myth. And she leads the Fomor. Balor, looking at my notes, is a roughly equivalent to the Greek Titans.
Yeah.
So she is Celtic, he is Greek. That's why she has, bronze skin made by some Greek, Titan or god or whatever. And her father's Greek, so she's like this weird mix of Titans, and she is, the leader of the Fomor, and all they want to do with the peace talks is just use it as a staging ground for a declaration of intent. And the plan is for the Fomor to wipe out Chicago. Yeah. They're going to murder and destroy all of Chicago to create chaos and force the supernatural world out into the open. And she gives the supernatural world in Chicago an ultimatum: join or die.
Yeah, exactly. And while all that was going on, that comes at the tail end of, Harry and Laura, essentially, and Valkyrie and all of them trying to get Thomas out of the dungeon, where he is a fucking mess because those elves don't fuck around, John. They fucked him up bad.
Yeah. And he hasn't been able to feed. So, he's been without, the required feeding for a vampire for so long that his inner demon is literally feeding on himself, and he is eating himself to death.
Yeah, he's essentially become a prisoner of war, and he is just literally, physically, emotionally, verbally, mentally, is just a fucking wreck. He is literally, as John mentioned earlier in this episode, a bag of flesh at this point.
Yeah, and all we get from him is that, the reason he did this is for Justine. It's Justine, but we'll pick that up again in Battleground. While they're getting Harry out, or while Harry is getting Thomas out, I should say, Eithnu uses the Eye of Balor on Chicago and destroys the power grid. So the entire city's in a blackout. We lead to the fight between Ebenezer and Harry, the journey to Demon Reach, which is a magical secret hidey hole prison that Harry now is in charge of.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like akin to like Azkaban from the Harry Potter universe, or to bring it into real life, Alcatraz off in San Francisco Island. That's kind of how I pictured it, but it's like more mystical, and like really, really bad fucking people are locked up there.
Yeah, and like the spirit of the island is named Alfred now, because Harry is a giant fucking nerd.
Yeah, I appreciate the fuck out of that.
And the reason for the need to travel to Demon Reach is to get Thomas into essentially stasis in one of its cells. It's not going to be pretty. Harry is essentially dooming his brother to be tortured by the memory of everything he's done his entire life, which is fucking nuts.
Yeah, but it's the only way because while he's suffering through this purgatory, through this hell even, of all these memories and all the pain he caused everyone else, it's the only way to keep his body in like literal physical stasis, because until they find a cure, essentially until they find a reverse way to stop this feeding on himself and have it more so to where he can start feeding naturally and become a resemblance of what he was once.
And I think it's in part due to, they don't have the time to figure it out.
Yeah, but John, the fucked up thing is Harry doesn't tell this to Laura. He doesn't tell her that he's putting him in this fucking stasis thing. She just thinks they're gonna, run off to Demon Reach, and Harry's got a magical cure at Demon Reach to help. But he doesn't say. And again,
it goes back to your thing earlier.
Yeah,
these people need to talk to each other.
Just have a fucking conversation. In Harry's mind, he's like, look, if I told Laura the truth, she would absolutely go against it, and then he'd be dead. Which I get, but also you're not giving her the chance because she is smart. She can put two thoughts together. If you explain your cause and then go about it, you might actually do a lot better than this weird. And I don't even know how to call it. This weird conflict Harry and Laura go into, where she starts getting more cold towards him and becoming more of like the politician instead of being the person.
And it's honestly, it's a conflict that's not necessarily required, because if Harry actually communicated, we wouldn't have that problem. It's just like, at the end of the day, just if you trust her, which I think he does, even if it's a wary trust, you should bring her in. Like and to be even more critical of Harry, I don't even recall if he tells Murph what he's doing. It's just like, I'm taking him to Demon Reach because this is the only place I know he's absolutely going to be safe.
It's not clear to me either, John, to be quite frank, but I think Murphy's just like, no, I know Dresden enough to know that, like, whatever he's doing, it has to be done.
Yeah. So, Anthony, I think it's time to get into some final thoughts on peace talks. What do you got for me?
So overall, John, my main thoughts are kind of the same ones I've intertwined throughout the episode. I wish I would have read all the previous books to have a better knowledge of the character arcs, because even some of the minor characters that show up, it could have hit a little bit different if maybe I remember their arcs. Peace talks, for the most part, felt like an info dump, but it was an info dump that was needed based upon how long it's been since the previous book and what leads into Battleground, because we get into Battleground and literally it's what the title is. Like, there is no room to breathe. There's no room to have any character growth or development yes and no, but no, it's hit the ground running, and it has to be because of everything given, which we'll go into. So overall, that's my fault. I should have read the books more, or I should have gone on to that. Info dump, yes. And again, this whole book can be summed up with, the ending battle between Dresden and Ebenezer before they go to Demon Reach. It's like, dude, just fucking talk to one another. Take a second. I know the world's in peril, but take a second to explain to your allies, like, what your true intentions are. And I think a lot of the shit could have been avoided.
Yeah. My mindset is very similar in many regards to yours, Anthony. I feel like a lot of the conflict that exists in this book would be mitigated a lot if Harry and his friends and family actually had a full conversation as to what the hell is going on with each other and what the frustrations are, and just trying to work through the issues. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen, and it's all in the sense of drama, I guess. I feel like, I'm not 100% sold on the whole need to reread. I think it would have improved it, but it goes into something else that I was a little frustrated with, is that this is all filler, no killer.
Yeah.
And we're just stuck with the lead up to the big explosion that we know is coming.
Right.
Yeah, and that being said, what I appreciated most was coming back to Dresden more than anything.
100%.
And getting to sit in this world again, and to check up with these characters again, because it's been such a minute between the last adventure. So it's to see the evolution of that has been nice,
But John, even like you said, that the info dump, or this is just a preamble book, I appreciate it being two separate books, because especially now with as limited time I have, if I were to receive this as a double pack, and have it look like a Sanderson novel, like a Way of Kings novel, I would just be intimidated and have it sitting on my shelf for months, probably. Yeah. I'm not going to lie to you, because I was able to read each book within a day, within a few hours, really. And just the thought of like, okay, this is obtainable enough for me to do within a day or within a select, 3 hours. I can get through this book. Like that is, to me, it's obtainable. Like instead of looking at it, and I love Sanderson, I love him to pieces, I love his world building, and I love The Way of Kings. But it's like to see like Oathbringer, which I still have yet to finish or read, to see the size of that thing and go, Jesus Christ, I didn't know I had to intake the entire English dictionary to, you know what I mean, to read, to go through all thousands and thousands of pages. I appreciate it being split into two, but again, you can also make the argument of by purchasing 2 books at retail cost as opposed to just 1 book at retail cost. But I appreciate the splitting of it, even though I did bash it, even though I did say it was an info dump. I appreciated what they did.
Yeah, and I think it makes it easier just to digest and sit with it a little bit more. But I think we can get into what happens when we sit with it when we get into Battleground. So I think we can bring this to a close, don't you think?
I do, John, and please end tonight's episode as only you personally and magically can.
Good listeners, you have been listening to another episode of the Ludic Loungecast. I have been your co-host, John Soares. With me, and on behalf of my podcast brother, Antonicus Maximus IV, I cannot talk, so I will say thanks for laughing.
Fuego!
Hello, good citizens of Gotham City. This TV is not out of list. You have been listening to the Ludic Loungecast. For more, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Ludic Lounge, for Antonicus at RojoLoco44, and John at just John _0891. Or feel free to email us at theludiclounge@gmail.com. Quick, Robin, to that post. We have a podcast to listen to!